establish a fluid conversation with, for example, the farmers in Ecuador that are involved in these productive assemblies. Because, for example, we had the pleasure to visit last time the Happy Donkey from our friends here. But you have a lot of little details, technical details that are precious, that farmers in Ecuador do not know. And maybe they can combine with the ancient wisdom that they are carrying with the farmers here in Asia. So maybe one of the results of this forum could be to establish a technical cooperation through internet, through Skype.
Thank you. The possibility of building up collaboration between Asia and other regions. Let's get some more questions.
My name is Wang Qian and from China. I have a question I want to ask Shatana. And how many financial budget put into the sustainable agriculture, and where are they from? And I hope you can give me detailed information. Thank you.
The budget.
Financial budget.
Of a project of a national financial budget.
Financial budget of
organic farming or
for a small farmer or
Farmer or because Thailand have a system to promote the sustainable farming. So
I have no idea actually. But that's a good question because I also raised the issue of subsidies, farm subsidies. Conventional farmers got subsidized by, a tax-free fertilizer and pesticides, but not organic farming. So that's one of the issue. Now, whether Thailand has a budget for organic farming or not, back to the period of 1997, when we have a crisis, when we have an economic crisis, and social movement pressure for organic farming, I think they get around 60 million baht or something like that, 60 million baht to start, but then after that, no more, no more budget. But the Department of Agriculture will have budget for organic farming, but far less than conventional. I don't know the number, really, the figure. Sorry.
How about the earlier questions? I mean, the possible collaboration between Asian.
This is excellent idea, really. I think these people reaching out for knowledge, for learning. I think that before they set up their own network, they have seen things. No? So, South Forum can be a link. I once sat in the steering committee of the Sustainable Agriculture Project funded by the Independent Autonomous Organization under Thailand. Now it's no more because we have political crisis, there is uncertainty. I can link with organization called BioThai that work on technology and work on this trade that is related to knowledge, patent. They're also organized. I think some of you may have already known this. And Foundation for Sustainable Development. The paper that I have put as a reading, the person, Ms. Supayai Meung, is also the key person who can link. Yes, sure, we can do.
我叫何志雄，也是来自乡村建设中心。这个非常感谢浩达教授给我们带来很丰富的关于拉丁美洲的知识。然后我正好是有一些想法和疑问想请教老先生。就是说，教授讲到到21世纪，拉丁美洲它有一定的这种社会主义发展的转向，但是现在好像又退潮了。可能说这可能是一个退一步，然后再往更好的前进。所以我也听到有提到说， 比如说拿列宁在上个世纪20年代发展新经济政策的这个对比。但是我们如果多一些就是我自己的阅读经验，我会觉得当年列宁在做新经济政策的时候，他可能是有一个不得已的选择，就是说十月革命之后，一个新的苏维埃政府他建立一个新的苏维埃政府，然后还要去做工业化的这个原始积累，所以他不得不去找农民去提取剩余，所以他本来是想着说，我们如果有足够多的工业产品，有足够好的工业化，那我就可以直接去把这些都给农民就好了，然后去农民交换我需要的城市需要的粮食跟农产品，但是他做不到，所以才选择去做新经济政策。这种情况我是觉得就是说到后来我们在中国在毛泽东时代也碰到类似的问题，所以也是去把这样一个提取剩余的这么一个希望寄托到去农民，然后会去组织农民去做土地改革，然后做农民合作社，去做农村的基本水泥建设，去很好的去发展农民的这种生产，然后才来去支持他的这个新的左翼政府和他的工业化。所以我其实很想问，就是这些年来，过去10多年来，为什么在拉丁美洲，我们的这些看起来比较进步的左翼政府，他们为什么不去这样去做，去这样一种尝试？因为我觉得这个是中国过去一个可以给外面的其他国家可以借鉴的一个经验，并且呢，我还觉得这是一个很好的机遇，就是说现在虽然现在全球是一个很严重的经济危机，但是如果我们会想一想，会发现正是因为当年苏联它也是抓住了西方大萧条的这么一个经济危机，然后他自己的新的苏维埃政府没有因为外面的军事干预或者没有因为右翼的反抗而这个垮台，他坚持下来了，他用农民的支持坚持下来，所以他抓住世界经济危机。可以很好的去引进外面的这种工业化的这种支持。我觉得我们的现在像中国现在讲“一带一路”，其实我们中国是产能严重过剩，然后它也急于去把工业化输出去，但是这种对很多我觉得像拉丁美洲还没有去完成这样工业化，其实对他们来说也是一个机遇，但是前提是这样的国家要有一个比较强有力的政府去组织农民。首先，你的左翼政府不能就垮掉了。如果是说还是继续在这样的国家去发展单一化的这种大规模的农业，那它肯定会产生很大的问题，就是因为绝大部分的农民不可能得到收入，那么这个国家的左翼政府是不可能维持的，那么也就很难去再抓住机遇去发展自己的工业。所以我有这样一个问题和想法谢谢。
If I understand you correctly, I think Mr. Ho from the Rural Construction Organization in mainland China, I think he is asking a question on the possibility of, with reference to the previous experience in mainland China since 1949, the socialist revolution. There is a model of developing first industrialization and then with the industrial backing to facilitate the development of agriculture, and taking the advantage of the 1930s depression, global economic crisis. So coming back to today's scenario, we're also encountering this global economic crisis, and we have oversupply of industrial capacity. So could it be possible, I guess his question is, could it be possible for the Latin American government to think about this possibility of introducing this industrial backing development model to help the development of agriculture in this region?
I just want to supplement his question. I think that Mr. Ho is actually the citing example in China, saying that well, China, well, in a certain period of time, that instead, because that China actually tried to build up the countryside so that they can create enough surplus so that they can support industrial growth in the cities. So that is the experience of China, because he says that it's very important that you need to have enough accumulation so that you can have exchanges, and then to have a kind of that kind of new economic policy that's you mentioned by in your speech of Lenin in the Soviet Union is to actually generate enough primitive accumulation. And he said that in China they have that kind of experience, that they actually accumulate that kind of surplus by building up the village, by building up building agriculture, so that it can fit into the city, fit into the industrialization of China. So he's saying that this experience of China, could it be a reference to the development in Latin America today? Because right now that he says that the monoculture development of agriculture in Latin America today is very dangerous, because it's not benefiting the farmers, it's not benefiting the country. So how can it, if it's hurting the villages, it's hurting the peasants, how can it be benefit to the sustainable development of the country as a whole? So he's just asked, I think his question is saying that, is it possible that the Chinese experience of building up the village as a kind of a reference for those progressive government in Latin America today? So I think that's another thing that he raised.
Thank you. Shall we take in one more question, and then we ask the speaker to respond?
Because maybe my question is also related with his, because I want to ask my question to Francois about the role of progressive government in Latin America, because it is very similar, the progressive, so-called progressive government, limited progressive government in Asia also. So most of social movement activists were mobilized by and also invited by the new government, and you analyzed that kind of recruitment might be weakened the social movement sector. But I think then what is the alternative? Because if we are pulling our energy in building new government, then what kind of, if the new government leaders are working with the old bureaucrats, so is there any possibility to make visible changes? So in that sense, it is a kind of inevitable process. Then what is the strategically relevant way of division of labor between some kind of political mobilization and the social movement? So we see the realities. So another point is that so you pointed out all the limitations of a progressive government, but I myself try to find some positive changes through this new government, because otherwise it is very difficult to persuade ordinary voters to vote for relatively progressive government. Because so I did some research for Seoul Metropolitan City and others, where the limitations of transformation and also certain fruit of changes. So otherwise it is very difficult to proceed the changes. So do you see any positive achievement other than use the petroleum rent? So if they don't have money, if they couldn't make a good reformation, according to your presentation, I see because of lack the price control, the new government maybe they don't have any leverage and alternatives to proceed on the transformation. So that is the. So I want to ask you whether there is other leverage for them to proceed on more reinforce the positive transformation.
Thank you. Two questions for you.
But I think that the questions are quite fundamental and very interesting. First of all, I'd like to explain the limits of my own vision. I am not an economist, I am a sociologist, so I am more, of course, aware of the social aspects and the aspects of social organization of the agrarian question. The second, I have not studied really the Chinese experience. I have studied more the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese experience, but to a certain extent has been quite similar to what has happened in China. So my reference is more North Vietnam, what happened in North Vietnam, especially in the communes, in the rural communes of North Vietnam. So what can we say as a whole? First of all, the problem of land reform is not just a problem of distribution of land, as we know. It is a problem of transformation of the rural society. It is not enough to distribute land, because if we distribute land without giving the possibility to the peasant to have social condition of working and of living culturally a normal life on land, there is little use of just distributing land. So the fundamental problem on a I would say a long-term problem is really how to transform rural society. What is happening now, not only in Latin America, but in particular in Latin America, is the depopulation of the rural areas. But also not only people going away, but especially young people going away. It's typical in Ecuador, it is typical in some other countries also, because the society, the rural society, is not giving the possibility of a normal social, cultural and economic life. Even if poverty, like Pedro told me to recall, poverty in a country like Ecuador, but also in some other of the progressive countries in Latin America, has diminished very strongly. However, perhaps more because of the assistential type of policies which help to the poorest people, which of course is not to be condemned, at the contrary, but more perhaps assistance policies than structural policies. What we want to show, for example, in Ecuador, is that it is more efficient to fight against rural poverty, developing peasant agriculture, than just having assistential policies, because it is a longer time, a policy which has effects on a long-term effects, and not only short times effects. So the fundamental problem is how to transform rural society so that the different functions of agriculture can be met. Not only the productivity, most of the visions also of the progressive countries in Latin America are very productivist. Of course, production is one very important aspect, But it is not the only aspect. One of the functions of agriculture is, of course, to produce the food, not only quantitatively, but also qualitatively, to feed the population. But another function is also to protect nature, to help nature to reproduce itself. It's not only agriculture, but agriculture has a very great role to play along that line. And then the third function is to provide a dignified life for the people working in agriculture, to provide a normal social and cultural life. So agriculture has many functions, not only productivity. And we have to think about the transformation of rural society as a long-term process of what we can call a real land reform. Now, what can we learn from the Asian experience in Latin America? We can learn quite a bit. First of all, that there are different types of land reform. The land reform of Korea, for example, of South Korea or Taiwan, or even Japan, have been land reforms within the framework of a capitalist economy and in order to promote industrialization. Korea, it was very clear, because the government bought the land to the landlords, but obliged the landlords to invest in industry. That has been one of the factors. The other factor was, of course, the foreign investment. But that was one of the factors of the rapid industrialization of South Korea. But not only the government bought the land to the landlords, but sold the land to the peasants, with the result that the small peasant had to go into a circle of debt to pay for their land. And so there has been these tremendous reactions of the peasants in Korea of opposition against the land reform. And if I remember well, about 200,000 people were killed because of the revolts against that type of land reform. And today, as we know, about 3 to 4 peasants every day are committing suicide because they cannot pay their debt. So that is a type of land reform which has been geared toward industrialization, not toward the well-being of the peasants, and within the framework of a capitalist orientation. And as a result, also, South Korea has lost its food sovereignty. South Korea has to import about 70% of its food, and of course from whom? From the United States of America, even rice. So a total loss of food sovereignty. So that is one type of land reform. The other type of land reform is the one we have known in China and in Vietnam. Of course, it has not been without difficulties. We don't have to be, just to have a kind of stereotype idea. It has been very difficult. But I have studied more, for example, land reform in Vietnam. Well, the commune I studied in Vietnam, the name is Hai Van, near the Chinese Sea. This commune that I have studied, before the land reform, was producing 1 ton of rice per hectare. 1 ton of rice per hectare. After the land reform took quite a bit of time, about 20, 25 years. happily they were wise enough not to force land reform. Every year at the beginning, still some peasants with their buffalo were taking again their small land and cultivating their land. But what has been the achievement of the land reform there in North Vietnam was the fact that the government reorganized the whole system of irrigation and building the big channels of irrigation and asking the people to build themselves the small channels of irrigation. And with the transformation of the whole irrigation system, they allowed to have 3 crops a year, not only 1. 2 crops of rice and 1 crop of vegetables. And in a few years, and that was during the war, the French War and the American War, with a great deal of men being in the war, and so women working in the fields. During those years, without chemical products, because they were unable to buy chemical products or to fabricate chemical products, without industrialization, without electricity, they passed from 1 ton per hectare of rice to 9 tons per hectare. Just transforming with the transformation of the irrigation system and the transformation of the organization of labor. So it is quite impressive to see how a reorganization of the labor and of course, infrastructure of irrigation could produce that kind of result. After that, with the Doi Moi is the renovation. It is the same policy as Deng Xiaoping, the Deng Xiaoping reform in China. After the Doi Moi, of course, it was at the beginning of the 80s, then there was the introduction of the market. And the Vietnamese Institute of Sociology asked me to remake the study of the commune to see what has been the impact of the introduction of the market on the life of the commune. And of course I discovered that there has been a new increase in productivity. Why? Because they began to introduce chemical products. And because there was a small mechanization of agriculture, and they came to a productivity of 13 tons per hectare. So from 9 to 13. But the main increase of productivity was before. That means from 1 to 9, without any kind of technical achievements, like I said. So that was really a very interesting experience, showing that it is possible to come to not only to a new productivity, but to a whole transformation of society, because I suppose it has been quite similar in China, except that China, the commune were much bigger. In North Vietnam, the commune remained relatively small. And the advantage was that they used the former social structure of the Lang. The Lang was the small village, as the base for the reorganization of the commune. The old Lang was the base for the organization of the teams of collective work, was the base also for the organization of the juridical system, etc. So there was a continuity in the whole social organization of the society and the new organization of production. And of course, there was the organization, the organization of schools, of a local hospital. I remember that at that time, of course, that 60% of the needs for health was produced in the commune with a small garden, medical garden in the commune. All this was a very, very interesting step. Now, after the introduction of the market, we had some change. And the change were first the utilization of chemical products with more and more contamination of water and less fishes in the waters. We had also the fact that some new social distance were built up by the reintroduction of the market, and some other consequences like that. Anyway, that kind of land reform was a land reform thought in function of the different functions of agriculture, not only productivity, but social transformation, cultural transformation, and also the care for nature. The reintroduction of market immediately destroyed especially the relationship with nature, with more destruction of nature. So this is very interesting to see what are the effects of the different types of land reform in Asia. And when we add to that the main policies of the World Bank with the neoliberal policies in Asia, we see also the effects that this has had. I remember in Sri Lanka, in the year 1996, the World Bank imposed to Sri Lanka a policy to try to stop the production of rice in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, more than 3,000 years that they were producing rice. And rice was is the base of the nutrition, of the food of the country. But it is not only a problem of food, it is also a problem of culture. It is a problem of the scenery. It is part of the literature, of the poetry, of the history. Rice is a central part of all the life in Sri Lanka. But rice had to disappear in Sri Lanka according to the World Bank. Why? Because it was cheaper to buy rice in Vietnam or in Thailand, because, true enough, because of geographical conditions, it was easier to produce rice in Thailand and in Vietnam, because Sri Lanka is a hilly country. So just only for economic calculation, you see, the plan of the World Bank was to change the agricultural production of Sri Lanka in export production and to finish with rice. Now, in order to impose that to the government, because the government of Sri Lanka at that time did not want to accept that, they asked the Sri Lankan government first to suppress all subsidy for rice production. Then they asked to put a price to irrigation water, which had never been priced before. And finally, they asked to promote private property of land, because rice production was still on the former organization of collective land and redistribution of land every year. Of course, it was not for the well-being of the peasants, but it was to make the peasants in the possibility of selling their land to the corporations, foreign or local, which were there to promote monoculture. And because the government of Sri Lanka refused, the World Bank stopped any international credit during 1 year. During 1 year, Sri Lanka had no more access to international credit in order to force the government. Then came another government, which was neoliberal, and said, well, the idea is not bad, because of course we need to promote industrialization. And we have organized the free trade zones, so to attract foreign capital. And therefore we need manpower. And the manpower will be the peasants abandoning their land. And so they were going to accept that kind of policy. But that came at a moment, precisely, that Vietnam and China were going to open their own territories also to free trade zones, with salaries which were even more attractive for international capital than Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka had done that since more than 20 years. And the workers' organization had been active and had succeeded in increasing the salaries, in increasing social security and pensions, so that the cost of labor was higher than Vietnam or China. And just at that time, some of the foreign capital in Sri Lanka was leaving Sri Lanka to go to Vietnam and to go to China because it was more attractive for comparative advantages. So then, of course, the whole thing collapsed. The whole plan of the World Bank collapsed, and happily, to a certain extent, so happily, Sri Lanka has been able to continue to produce rice, and to produce its own rice, which is a different type of rice than the rice of Thailand and the rice of Vietnam. So those are the stories, I think, that we must know in order to see what kind of policy can we apply in Latin America. And in Latin America, of course, the physical conditions are completely different. But the logics can be the same. The logics are the same. In the sense of how to promote the three main functions of agriculture: production of food, the regeneration of the earth, and the well-being of the peasant population. Those three main functions are the same. The way of accomplishing may be different, but it is possible. And precisely in the institute where I am teaching, we have, during 1 year, we have worked on peasant agriculture with a monthly seminar open to all the people interested in agriculture in Ecuador, from the Ministry of Agriculture to the social movements, some of the NGOs, the academic organization, etc. And finally, we organized a final seminar regrouping many of those people to try to see what kind of proposals could be done to promote the different functions of agriculture in a land like Ecuador, but it could be any other one too. And the proposals coming from the people, from the different people, from the governmental organization to the social movement, have been recollected, and we have put that in three main orientation: short time, middle time, and long term. And for the short time proposal, we have retained 27 proposals which could be applied within a year.
within a year. And we have tried also to see how much that would cost, because we are facing an economic crisis in Ecuador or in the other countries. So, of course, it is a problem, is very well to say we have to promote this and this and this kind of policy, but we have to know how much it costs. And we came to the conclusion that a 27 proposal, a short time proposal, would not cost very much more than the part of the budget that the Ministry of Agriculture could not spend last year. So, could not spend last year. So with that part of the budget of agriculture, which is one of the smaller budgets of all the ministries in the country, because that is one of the problems of the progressive governments. They are not really very interested by agriculture. And you see that very concretely, the way how much money is given to agriculture. In Ecuador, it is not even the 1/3 of the defense budget, budget of agriculture. And we have seen the structure of labor, how agriculture is important in a country like Ecuador. So we should, of course, have perhaps another distribution of the national wealth for policies. But what is important, I think, is to show that it is possible. That it is possible to make some steps and to go forward. It is not a problem of ideology, it is a problem of very concrete construction and of course of trying to mobilize because it's not only the governments which are perhaps not aware, not aware of the problem, but even social movements, even peasants' movements have not been always really aware of what is possible to do. So the Asian experience can give some lights to what could be done in Latin America, in spite of all the difference, like I said before, because in spite of the difference, the logic is the same. And that's why it was important to have research work and to publish results of research work of what has happened in Asia, also for Latin America.